Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Welcome to Sicily. You can see the salvage of Bayesian going on in the background here. Now, last week before the MAIB report came out, I mentioned that we were going to do a video. We were going to talk about the lawyer who's representing, I guess, the family of Ricardo Thomas. And we said we were going to talk about what he's been saying on Italian television, and then we were going to refute what he was saying based on the evidence that's now been produced by the MAIB, but also by the norms of working on a superyacht, how things work, how the systems work on board, how the alarm systems work. We've just recorded a podcast, which we haven't done for quite a long time. It will be on the Yacht Report podcast channel. It's not going to be on there for a few days. It will be on Patreon probably tomorrow. So if you want to watch it, you can sign up to Patreon, but it will be on the Yacht Report podcast probably towards the end of the week. This is a section from it where we talk about the lawyer, what he said, and we explain it. The lawyer who's representing Ricardo Thomas, I assume he's representing the family of Ricardo Thomas. He was on a show, an Italian show, called Quarta Repubblica, and he was talking about what he believes may have been happening on the night, and why it may have resulted in the sinking of the vessel. Now it's been translated from Italian, so it's a little bit. I had to clean it up a little bit. So it doesn't. It might, if it sounds a bit weird, the way it's worded, it's because it's translated from Italian. And also there was like 4 people talking all over each other in this show, so it's really hard to translate it. But the lawyers, whose name I don't have here, he said that this is his theory. He says, I would not be surprised if it turns out that the crew or parts of the crew at the most dangerous moment were not on board. From when the boat takes on water to when it turns takes time, because we've seen the images that show the lights go out, which is not accurate. The electricity goes out because there is flooding of the engines when the vessel is still horizontal. That's incorrect. So this flooding lasts quite a while, and in this time, that is quantified, I guess he means because of the video, there are those who say 15 minutes, there are those who say much more, and nobody intervenes. He says the lights go out, no one starts the engines, no one puts the ship to the bow, the ship's bow to the wind, no one does the actions that you don't need to be Checo Bruni to understand what needs to be done, elementary actions. I guess that's a famous sailing Italian guy. I don't know who that is. I should have checked before I started this, but I didn't. He says, and why the captain and crew, they did not carry out these operations, either because, I don't know, he disappeared, he's talking about the captain, or he was really asleep for some reason. He and all the others are saying they were all asleep, or it's not possible, or it's possible that they were not on board. They had gone away at that moment. The moment they realized that the sea is rising and the storm is approaching, they quickly returned to the ship. He said this was to explain the circumstances. It's clear that they keep the tender in the water because in the morning the chef would go to buy food for the owner. So the tender was in the water, and they could have used it to go out and to come back. And the water that flooded for a long time, where did the water in the engine room come from? So that's what he says. Like I said, it's a bit broken because that's just the way it was translated. But you get the drift. He's basically saying that that the engine room was flooded while the vessel was still upright. Well, that doesn't make any sense at all. And there was a blackout, which we don't believe it was the case. I think it's been proven now by the Marine Accident Investigation Branch's report. They say that the vessel, the engines only stopped, the generators, should I say, only stopped when the vessel was knocked down, which would make sense because they would be starved of fuel. And then the emergency generator, they have battery backup. They don't have emergency generator on this vessel, but they have a battery system that turned on the emergency lights. So the vessel was powered until the vessel got knocked down. Now, the video footage that they're referring to is a CCTV camera footage that showed the vessel, that appeared to show the vessel's lights going out. I was never convinced. I was never convinced that video footage actually showed the lights going out, because they said that the light on top stayed on and the rest of them went out. Well, the visibility on that night was so bad, and the vessel was pushed away from the camera, and I think that as the vessel turned, it just disappeared into the bad quality of that camera and the terrible weather they had. It just made it appear that the lights had gone out, but I don't think they ever did. So that's not proof. So I don't believe the lights did go out. And I think the fact that the Marine Accident Investigation Branch is saying that when the vessel was knocked down, the lights went out, that's probably because they've got the records from the AMS system on board, which is the alarm and monitoring system, which all vessels have. All modern vessels have this system. I've showed them in my yacht tours many times. Whenever I go on the bridge, I show you the controls, and it shows you the ballast and how much fuel is in the tanks and all that stuff. And that's called an AMS system. And they will have had, every time you do anything on the vessel, it creates a log in the AMS system, and they've retrieved that system, I believe, and that's what they've used. Corroboration of eyewitnesses plus that data will show, I have no doubt, that the vessel's power only went out when the vessel got knocked down. So that footage that we've seen time and time again on the news of the vessel apparently having a blackout is not accurate. He says that nobody intervenes, and he says that he believes that the engineer was ashore when this happened, and that's why he didn't intervene. Now, the MAIB report says that well, in the story, the recreation we've done, the engineer wakes up, he goes in the engine room, he switches on the generators. That will be verified by the AMS system, right? So he's gone into the engine room, started up the generators, he went up to the bridge, he started all of the pumps for the bow thrusters and the steering, and then the captain asked the chief officer to go down. He was on the fly bridge, go down to the wheelhouse, and he met the engineer there, and he said, yeah, everything's ready to go. And it was just at that moment when the vessel got knocked down. So the engineer was on board. He started the engines. He started the generators. Sorry, I keep saying engines. He started the generators for maneuvering. He started all 3 generators. I think there were 4 generators on board, but he started 3 generators, and then he told the chief officer, yes, everything's ready to go. Now, the idea that the only engineer is ashore in the boat, it doesn't make any sense. And there's a number of reasons, and this is the way yachts are operated. First of all, the boat being in the water, the tender being in the water, that some vessels do that. They'll put the tender on the line on the stern of the vessel, they'll close the shell door, and they'll just leave it there overnight. And that's because in the morning, when you've got guests on, tender operations, especially on a small yacht, I know it's a big sailing yacht, but it's a small vessel, it's only got 2 decks. The tender operations is noisy, and it will wake up the guests, so they don't want to do that. So they leave the boat in the water, and then they just pull it in on the line, open the shell door, pull it in the line, they get in, and they can go off, right? Let's just say, for argument's sake, that the engineer goes ashore. He would not go ashore in the tender and then stay ashore with the tender just moored in the marina. That never happens. The tender is always with the boat. So even if he did go ashore, someone would take him ashore in the boat. He would get off, and then the boat would go back, and it would be with the yacht. It's always the way it is. They never go ashore and keep the tender ashore, because the next person who needs to use it, the boat's not there, right? So the idea that he would just get in it and go ashore himself, it doesn't make any sense either, because you can't do it, because somebody has to let him out. He has to open the shell door. It doesn't work. Now, let's just say, for instance, that he's ashore, and the lawyer says because he was ashore, nobody answered the alarms in the engine room. Well, that's incorrect, because the way a system works on board is everybody who bridge watch and the engineers. On this vessel, there's only one engineer, but they all have an alarm panel in their cabin. So the captain has one, the chief officer has one, the deck guys on this boat probably have one. Usually it's officers, so there'll be like the second officer, the chief officer, the captain, the chief engineer, and the other engineers. On a vessel that I worked on where there's multiple engineers, they all have an alarm panel. And the way that system works is the engineer's panel is first. So if there's an alarm, it sounds in the engineer's cabin. If he doesn't answer it within a minute, let's say, then you have a backup system. So on that panel, you can program who's next. So if after a minute there's no response, it will sound in the captain's cabin and the chief officer's cabin. And I'm reliably informed that on this vessel or on Peruvian Navy yachts, there's a panel in every cabin, every crew cabin. So they will turn off the ones that the crew that, like the stewardess doesn't need to know what's going on in the engine room. So they'll turn those off probably. I believe some captains have them all operating, so everyone gets woken up. So, but there's no scenario where an alarm goes unanswered. So that deals with that issue. Now, another thing about working on yachts is when there are guests on board, the shore leave for crew is cancelled. Now, there are exceptions, very few exceptions. I've worked on vessels where I've joined a vessel, I've worked for 10 weeks, and I've not gone ashore in 10 weeks because the owner's been on board the entire time. And when I leave, he's still on board. And then I leave, and that's the first time I've stepped ashore in 10 weeks. I've worked on a yacht where I was on board for 3 months, and I only got one day where I was able to go ashore, and that's because the owner left, and he went for a meeting in Florida. He flew from the Bahamas to Florida, and that was one day, and I didn't even get the day off because I still had to work, but I got some time off in the afternoon to go ashore for 3 months, 12 weeks, or more than 12 weeks. That's generally the way things are. It depends on who you are. In that time, other people got to go ashore, because there were multiple people of the discipline. So the stewardesses, if there's 5 stewardesses, if the owner lives on board, that's usually when that rule of no shore leave is dealt with differently, because the owner lives on board and he's always on board. So the crew need to have a little bit of downtime if it's for months. If they're not on a full rotation, so if I'm doing 10 weeks on and 10 weeks off, then I don't get any time off. If the stewardesses are working for 5 months in a row, they can't make them work for 5 months and not give them a day off. So they get a little bit of time off here and there. But that's the exception. And generally, and this vessel was boss on, guest on, they were full. That's a big deal. Most yachts, they have a capacity of 12 people, but they only have 3 or 4 people on, the owner and his wife and maybe a couple of kids or something. And that's enough for the guests, for the crew. It's very, very stressful working, even when you've only got a couple of people on. You think it would be easy, but it's not. When you've got a full contingent of guests on board, and there are actually more guests than crew on this boat, that's a big deal. The idea that they're going to go and party in the middle of the night when they're already probably only getting 6 hours sleep is crazy, right? The hours of rest that we're supposed to have 8 hours of rest in a 24-hour period, and we rarely get it when boss is on, and this crew were probably maxed out. They were probably all fatigued, exhausted, because the owner had been on for at least a month. As far, my records only went back, I think they went back 6 or 7 weeks, and the owner had been on the entire time. So the crew would have been exhausted. And the following day, the 19th, the day that the yacht sank, the guests were meant to be leaving from here, from Porticello, and the yacht was going for a refit period, and the crew would have got downtime then. That's when the crew gets the downtime. The owner leaves. The yacht is either laid up somewhere, waiting for them to come back, and then the crew gets some downtime. The captain will reduce their hours. They'll just have a normal 9 till 5, and then maybe probably get weekends off, depending on if they're on rotation or not. That's how it works. And this idea that the crew were going ashore and partying and stuff like that is it's nonsensical. So the idea that the crew were not on board is false. And the idea that because, let's just say, one of them was ashore, which I don't think he was, but let's just say the engineer was missing, he's saying that it means that the alarms would go unanswered. I've already explained that that's not true either. That's not how it works at all. So there are a lot of holes in that theory. I think that I was going to bring this up, 10 days ago, I said I'm going to talk about the lawyer and what he said, and then the next day the MAIB report was released, and we got sidetracked and we went into that, and when we did that, I thought, well, this kind of blows a hole in that theory anyway, because they talk about the engineer waking up and going in the engine room and starting the generators, and that will all be confirmed by the AMS system, the alarm and monitoring system on board. So there you go. So that's as far as I'm concerned, the lawyer is just lawyering, and he doesn't, obviously, clearly has no experience working on a yacht, but that's the way it works on every yacht I worked on, and I've not met anyone who's said anything differently about how their yacht operated. All right, guys, I'll leave it there. I hope you found this interesting. Let me know in the comments below what you think about what I just said in this video. And yeah, look out for the podcast. We'll obviously, when it comes out, we'll let you know where you can download it. You'll be able to get it on Spotify and all that. But we also have a YouTube channel called the Yacht Report Podcast as well. So you can check it out there as well. All right, guys, thanks for watching. Bye-bye.